Welcome back to the Lion's Den. Today we speak with Rich LaMonica, who is the founder of the Misfit Nation. Rich spent over 20 years in the Army, and we talk a lot about that in this episode, as well as the difficulty of transitioning out of the Army and back into civilian life. Rich has some great stories and a lot of really good insight. Now, what he's doing on top of consulting for and training in the military, he is also an author and a motivational speaker. And he's got a lot of very powerful things to say. So check it out. So Rich, I have never had anyone on the show who has had such a long career in the Army. And so I would love to start the conversation there if we could. I was on your LinkedIn page. You spent 22 years in the Army. I'm sure during that time you did many, many different things, but could you just kind of summarize what your career path was over those 22 years in the Army?
I could, yes. I came in out of Jersey City, New Jersey in 1993. My first stop was Fort Stewart, Georgia. And at that point, I met my wife, and I was a chemical operations specialist, which basically trained soldiers to survive on the modern battlefield if chemical weapons were used. And for 22 years, I served around the world, Korea, 3 times in Korea, Fort Riley, Kansas, Fort Campbell, Kentucky twice, Anniston, Alabama, and then, of course, Iraq, Afghanistan, a total of 4 times for a global war on terrorism before retiring in 2015.
Wow. Okay. Are chemical weapons often used on the battlefield?
They have not been used directly against us. Iraq used it against their own people in 1988 in the town of Halabja was the last real confirmed use. Syria used it against their people, but that's still up in the air if it was real or not.
Wow. And so what does it look like, surviving that? Is it like gas mask on? Like what kind of is the drill for that?
So use your protective posture, your protective equipment. Like, so you said gas mask, and we have suits as well. We train them to put their suits on and their mask within a certain time so they would survive the initial attack and be able to decontaminate their skin, face, and still be able to move forward to get to a further decon if needed.
Okay. Gotcha. Wow. So 22 years in the Army, obviously that means you're, rising through the ranks. At what point do you start to have troops, I guess would be the term, actually reporting to you? And how big did your platoon, correct my terminology if I'm using the wrong terms here. How big, how many people were you sort of in charge of over time?
So after about 18 months, I became a sergeant. And at that point, I had, I think, 2 people under me very early. So you basically getting your feet wet. And then by the time I retired, at times I had 32 people under me. I sat as the first sergeant for a company with almost 200 people that fell under my charge and care.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. And I mean, we have a lot of business owners on the show, and a lot of business owners listen to the show. And so there's a lot of leadership lessons that can be taken from this.
Right.
In fact, most of the business owners in the world never have 200. They never have 200 people reporting to them. It's hard to get a business that size. Are there any leadership lessons or things that you had to kind of overcome and learn while you were on the job in order to manage that many people?
Oh, definitely. Like I said, when I started with 2 people, and I learned from Sergeant Humberto Lopez, who's my first platoon sergeant. And I learned a lot of leadership from him, a lot of great things from him, a lot of how to be a tough leader. And back in the 90s, you were allowed to be a real tough leader. So there's a lot more no holds barred when leading. So you can yell at people, you can keep them late, you can ridicule them, you can make them do push-ups all day long as you push them in the right direction. And at first, that's how I was leading. I was leading the same exact way. And it was probably around the time 9/11 happened, when this light bulb went off in my head. Hey, you might need to start adjusting. You might have to start adjusting how you lead, because there's different people in the military. It's not just one type of person. There's different people. And I started adjusting, and it wasn't really till about 2010 where I started to really get it correct. I got it right, and I learned social intelligence. I learned how to understand that each person is different and to approach each person as a different entity to make the whole team better. And it started working out really well by the time I was on my glide path out in the last 5 years.
Wow. And I think that's a huge lesson too. I mean, I know my first business or 2 that I was running, I took that same sort of Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan leadership style of just just be a totally ruthless, expect a super high, level of productivity and delivery from everybody on your team, and just treat them like they're you, basically. And it just never works out as well as you want it to, because of what you're saying, right? You have to speak to people in the way that they need to be spoken to. It's really smart.
Exactly. And I mean, it's a tough lesson, but I'm glad I learned it.
Yeah, no doubt. I've never really asked anyone this who was in the military for a long time. Like, what did you love about your time in the Army? And then, maybe on the flip side, what was like the most challenging thing about it that was a huge pain?
What I like about the Army, being in the Army was like being a little kid for 22 years. being in playing on it, I looked at it as being in the kids game for 22 years, and then the biggest challenge was learning to adapt to rapid change at all times. You're always on the move and always changing. So every 2 years when I first came in, I was moving. I was actually literally moving me and then my new wife anywhere around the country, or around, I was moving around the world while she was moving somewhere else in the States while I was in Korea the first time. So learning to adapt to those kind of changes, then learning to the constant change of what our mission is, our mission focus, from straight training to go to war, World War III, for lack of better terms, is what we were training for before 9/11. And then you go into the global war on terrorism, which is a totally different war, different mindset, and it's asymmetric at that point. So you have to really learn and adjust on the fly, and learn to be analytical, and be able to teach and train your soldiers to lead the same way you are, so they can take your place on the next level.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think about in the business world, companies are always having to pivot and adapt and, changing market demands and that sort of thing. Obviously, they're doing that in a sphere in which like their life is never in danger. So it's a little lower pressure scenario, but that's interesting. So one thing I hear a lot about, and I've worked with, ex-military, ex-Marine guys before, different companies I've worked at. A topic that is always interesting to me is the transition from serving in the military to now just working in business. And
Right.
it always strikes me like that transition is very difficult. What was it like for you?
Well, for me, I thought I had a plan. I thought I had everything mapped out. I knew I was going to just glide right from the Army and go work with a government service in the Army, or maybe another government entity up in the greater DC area, because my last duty station was up in Maryland. I figured I'd have no problem getting a job. The problem was, after almost, at that point, I think it was 15 years of war, a lot of people retired from the military during that time and took all the jobs that were open, and they
Okay.
weren't retiring anytime soon from those jobs. So for me to get a job there, it wasn't there. So I put all my eggs into that basket, and the basket was full.
Mm,
So my transition was not one of immediate success. I took 365 days exactly to find a job. And
mhm.
at that point, I started working for a nonprofit called The Mission Continues, and I was mentoring other veterans, ironically, on their transition, and getting back into their communities. So I felt like I learned so much during my year about resilience and how to adapt and try to overcome, get back into the civilian world, because it's like two different worlds, completely polar opposites, really. But there's a lot of things that cross over like a Venn diagram. And when I got those lessons, I was able to go into the Mission Continues and push forward and help other veterans, my brothers and sisters there, to get jobs or to find focus in their communities, while also looking for my next gig. And if you're, the best time to look for a job is when you have a job. So I had that job. I started looking, and finally, one of my old first sergeants called me and said, "Hey, you want to work with me?" I said yes. So after 2 years, I moved to the current job I have now, and it's been great ever since.
And what is that job?
I train soldiers on emerging threats, so they too can survive if they have to deploy at this time.
Okay, and I think I saw on your LinkedIn that's for Booz Allen Hamilton.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so that's like a major consulting firm.
It is
And
very. It's an awesome firm.
yeah, okay, and so they have a government contract for training soldiers, basically.
Right,
That's what you're doing.
for the Army side. Yes.
Okay, wow, that's fascinating. Um, so during that 365 days when you were, really having a major challenge of trying to figure out where you fit into the civilian world, I mean, what were you doing over that 365 days? Was it like constant networking? Were you trying to get credentialed at certain things? Were you trying to figure out like, what job even made sense for you? Like what were you doing during that period?
I think I could say yes to nearly all of what you said there. I did, I did networking. I learned before I got to get on LinkedIn, because if you're not LinkedIn, you're linked out. That was what I was taught. So
Yeah.
I built my LinkedIn, made that beautiful, and I started like getting little threads out there. There's a veteran mentor network on there. I was on there. I got with eMentors, I with Veterati, and Hire Heroes USA. I got with all of them to try to help me revamp my resume, to revamp me. With Wounded Warrior Project, I started taking classes on IT stuff, and I was not very good at it at all. I just was not smart enough to do that stuff. And I sat there in a class and I felt like I was hearing a different language being spoke to me. You really are, but I was like, wow, what is this? How do these kids do this? And then when I said, how do these kids do this? I knew I shouldn't be doing this. So I got enough out of that to learn that I shouldn't do it, and I moved forward. And I tried to find my purpose after that. And I volunteered at the Red Cross for about 700 hours, I think, during that period. And then I got the job with Mission Continues, and I kept focusing on trying to find that purpose. And I realized my purpose was helping others, or helping others to succeed. And that's kind of what I do now. I train soldiers, so I'm still helping soldiers, and then I volunteer on the side to help mentor youth to become the next leaders of our country.
Okay, got it. Right, and that's how we met, through the mentor project. That's right.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the things, what ex-military, ex-Marine guys who I've worked with in the past, I always find that they're very good at, I guess I'll say, any sort of like operational role in the business world, because, and I had like an ex-Marine explain this to me one time. Because I just kind of asked him, like, what do you guys get really good at in the Marines? And he was like, we're basically trained to very quickly and systematically go through option A, then option B, then option C, then option D. It's like, if A fails, just move to B. If B fails, move to C. And that's something that people in the business world, in the real world, have a very hard time with. It's like, if option A didn't work, I'm going to be stressed out. I'm not going to know what to do. I'm going to panic for 3 days before somebody gives me the right answer. Right.
Right.
And so these military guys are able to make a really big impact in operations, where it's just like, everybody keep your cool. Let's do the next thing we need to do. So I've seen that work really well.
Yeah, so when we're first taught about the orders process in the military. So you make your operations order, and we're also taught when you make that operations order, you spend weeks and weeks to make that plan. It's going to be awesome. We understand that it doesn't survive the first bullet that gets shot at you. Once that first bullet is shot at you, all that goes out the window, and you go back to the training you had. So you have to adjust on the fly right away. Even though you made this beautiful like thesis style document, you cannot use it because it has gone to the crapper once someone shoots at you. So you have to adjust on the fly. And the same thing with any just even regular everyday missions in the military. Like you said, if option A is not working, there's always a B, C, and D that you can just kind of roll into. You have those other options to make the mission succeed.
Yeah, totally. So you said your purpose is helping other people. You're helping, train. You're helping. Are you helping recently retired military personnel to integrate back into the working world as well?
I do talk to some of them, and then some of them come on my show. And through my show, I try to give as much resources as possible to my brothers and sisters as they come out, as well as first responders, because as they transition from being a first responder, that's something where they're on 24/7 every day of the week, and it's hard to really turn that off to do something else besides what they did, unless they were training themselves to do it while they were in there. So I try to help both of those career fields at the same time as they come out through my show.
Okay. And you mentioned, you talked about finding your purpose. Is that kind of like the big thing that you help them to do, is find their like new purpose? Or like, what does it look like as you're helping them sort of reintegrate and get back into the real world?
I try to ask them the question, what's your why?
Mm-hmm.
So understand your why. If you don't understand your why, you're just going to keep kind of running into that wall. This sucks. I don't like this job. If I take this job, these people really don't know what they're doing, because you're not doing something you're really happy with. If you're not happy with what you do, if you wake up in the morning and you're just miserable, it's not going to be a great job. You won't have fun at all. You want to go home as soon as you get there. You want a job that's not really doesn't feel like a job. It feels like something that is making you fulfilled, and that's your purpose. So that's why I try to break into their minds, write down what they think they can do or what they want to do.
Yeah. Okay. And is that so? I know that you are an author. You've written a couple books. One of them is a nonfiction 13
Yes.
step guide to success. So
Yes.
is what we're talking about in that book?
That book kind of makes you act like a good human, teaches you how to be a
Okay.
better person. It's not
Okay.
to be successful as a businessman or make $1 million. It's to maybe better your community, make a better you into your better community through stories
Okay.
of my life.
And so what are some of those steps? 13 step guide.
One major one in there is to know who your inner circle is. So you're five. You're the five people you can reach out to at any time. If something happens, you can reach out to them. They'll give you advice, and then break that circle out to that next network, the people that you could use as assistants along the way. So build that inner circle, and then grow that out. Another one is to look up from your phone. Look up those 3 inches and look you in the eyes and say, "Hey, how are you?" And actually mean it. You can make someone's day right there just by looking them in the eye and saying, "How are you doing?" You don't know what that person's going through. It'll make them smile, and maybe they'll think, "God, maybe I've been looking like a miserable person looking down all day. Maybe I'm going to be happy and move forward." And and I quote Colin Powell in there a lot. Great leader. I really looked up to him. He was a great general. He was a great leader in our country. And one of his things was, don't let the little things get mad, get over it. So if you get mad at something, great, get it mad and then get over it. So if you fail at something, learn from it and move on and stack those victories to the things you do well during the day.
Yeah, I love it. What about, I want to hit on real quick. You also wrote a fiction book, Out of
Yes.
the Darkness. That's not a lot of people write a fiction book. So what prompted you to do that? And what is that book about?
Well, that book was actually started way before 13 Steps. 13 Steps
Mhm.
came out of COVID. The last month of COVID, I wrote like a Jumanji post. You made it through all these levels. Now, these are the 12 things you need to do to be successful. My daughter said, write that book. So I wrote it. She edited it and we put it out and came out December of 21. But out of the darkness, I was writing forever. I just kept writing and stopping, writing and stopping. And then I realized I have to put it out. So it starts off with a soldier in battle, and he's on the mountaintop, and all he can smell is the blood and the gunpowder. And he's looking down himself, all bloody, and he starts to flash back over his career, then winds up back in the fight. And at the end, it's going through that mental health process of all the struggles that most military guys and gals come back with, that PTS or the TBIs or moral injuries that we fight. And within the book, it goes through that fight, and I just wanted to get it out there so other people know that they're not alone. And this book is a testament to a lot of people I served with. Each character is based off multiple people I served with, and I was going to do that and then do like a workbook with it as a nonfiction to pair with it. And people asked me to continue this, so I've started writing the second part of this as well.
Wow. That sounds awesome. Um, you mentioned a second ago, you mentioned stacking victories. What, what does that mean exactly?
So each day you do great things every day. So for me, I like to start early in the morning. If Adam McCraven in his book, he said called "Make Your Bed," his speech. First thing you do in the morning, you get up. For most of us older guys, that's a victory right away. Waking up is great. You're going to hear all the aches and cracks as you wake up, but that's part of aging. You stand up, that's a victory. Make your bed, that's a victory. Brush your teeth, that's a victory. Stack those victories each day and write down the number of great things you did each day. Like I said earlier, you're going to have shortcomings every day. We're humans. That's what happens. Every day, something's not going to go the way you planned it. Learn from it and move forward. Use that as a learning point. Don't use it as something to dwell on for the rest of your life. Just keep moving forward each day. So today I have 19 victories. Tomorrow I try to get 20. Just keep stacking those victories.
Okay. I love it. Is that in the mentoring work that you do? Is it sort of centered around stacking victories, or what do you get into with the mentoring?
Mentoring, I try to, like we said earlier, I focus on what the person is trying to do or trying to achieve. So
Mhm.
one mentee I have now wasn't really aimed at anything specific, but I'm trying to get them to motivate themselves to find that why, and then
Right.
from that why we can build out to other stuff. And I think it's going great. And this person is a great mentee. It gives me a lot of joy to talk to them and see someone as young as they are with so much ambition, but not the focus. If I get that focus and ambition connected, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, I hear you. Awesome. Well, what's next for you? It sounds like you got a lot going on. You've got a job, you're giving back, you're doing mentoring. Well, you've got a podcast. What else
Right.
is on the horizon? That's not enough, right?
That's not enough, right? So the next book, Forged in Resilience, is about halfway done, and I'm also working on my doctorate. I'm in my dissertation process of my doctorate right now through Liberty for Homeland Security.
Okay. Which would then allow you to do what?
Consult at a higher level, basically, or become a professor.
Okay. Got it. Got it. Awesome. One last question. I was on your LinkedIn, and I think this was the Booz Allen Hamilton thing I was looking at. It mentioned something about unmanned aerial vehicle kind of
Yes.
defense or something. Were you at all read in on the crazy drone situation that was happening in New Jersey and all that? So like, what is that a crazy question to ask you? What was that?
Uh, we just found out this week that it was authorized. It was authorized by our government to do it, so it wasn't foreign entities. But if you see them and they're up with lights, it's not something that's evil. If it's something evil, they'll tape the lights over. So keep that in mind if you see drones again. If you just hear them and you don't see lights, that means that something bad is about to happen or something bad is going on. They had their lights on, so they're mostly harassing and taking pictures probably. If that was the case, as far as being read in, I was not told anything's on the record, so
Mm-hmm.
I just know people's opinions. And my dad lives in New Jersey, so he asked me every time I talk to him, "What is this? What is this?" I don't know. I'm not there. I don't know.
Oh, that's funny. Awesome. All right. Well, hey, Rich, great having you on the show. Thank you very much. Is there anything we didn't hit on, or any last kind of thoughts or ideas you wanted to share with our listeners?
I think that's a great, Nico. Just tell the audience thanks for listening to me ramble for the last 20 something minutes, and tune into the Lions Den. And remember, just keep stacking victories daily, make your world a better place.
Love it. Keep stacking victories. Awesome. Thanks, Rich. Well, thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
No problem.